All right, so one of the hardest things to do in geometry is writing proofs. And we're going to start with some very basic ones here with parallel lines and transversals, and then using the transitive property in order to make connections. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be doing a lot of marking up the diagram. We're going to be talking about breaking it down into the parts of the given and making those connections using the transitive property, which says that if two things are congruent to the same thing, then they have to be congruent. All right, so I'm going to start by highlighting some of my pieces of my given information, like L is parallel to M. All right, that's given to us. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight those as well as my transversal. All right, and the other thing I'm going to do, if it's not already done in my diagram, is I'm going to put those little arrows on there to show that those marks show that those lines are parallel in my diagram. The other given information is that we can know that angle 2 is congruent to angle 9. All right, so that's another important piece of information. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and mark those as being congruent in my diagram. And I want to prove that angle 7 is congruent to angle 9. Well, I got to make a connection. There's no direct connection between 7 and 9 because 9 is way out there. But I can make a connection between angles 2 and 7. I can see that angle 2 and angle 7 are alternate exterior angles because they're both outside the parallel lines and they're on opposite sides of the transversal. So that means that those two angles have to be congruent. So in my proof, I'm going to start with a G for given. And what am I directly given? I'm given that the lines are parallel. So L is parallel to M. And I'm going to use alternate exterior angles to prove, so alternate exterior angles theorem, to prove that angle 2 is congruent to angle 7. And that's on top of the fact that I'm already given that angle 2 is congruent to angle 9. So now that I know both angle 7 and angle 9 are congruent to the same angle, they're both congruent to angle 2. You can see that those are shared there. I can now use the transitive property to prove that angle 7 is congruent to angle 9. All right, and I'm just going to fill in my flow chart there to show that those come together. I need two pieces of information to prove the transitive property. I need 2 is congruent to 7 and 2 is congruent to 9, and I should always end up with my proof statement, 7 is congruent to 9. All right, so let's look at another example. So in this example here, we can see that we have A is parallel to B and C is parallel to D. We want to prove that angle 1 is congruent to angle 11. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by doing this piece by piece. So I can see here that line A is parallel to B. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight my parallel lines. Now, in order to make this connection between angle 1 and angle 11, which I'll go ahead and highlight in yellow. So angle 1 and angle 11. All right, I can't make a direct connection. I can't just use corresponding angles because they're not connected with a single line. So I need to follow my transversal. So I've highlighted A as parallel to B. Well, I need to make a connection there to either 3, 4, 7, 8 or 9, 10, 13, 14. And it doesn't matter which way you go. There's always more than one way to write these proofs. So let's go ahead and show that angle 1 is congruent to angle 8. And we know that those are congruent because those are alternate exterior angles. So I'm going to go ahead and start with my given. A is parallel to B using the alternate exterior angles theorem. We can say that angle 1 is congruent to angle 8. So I'm creating my flow chart here. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 8. All right, so I already got one of my angles. Now I need to go ahead and make a connection using my second set of parallel lines. So I'll go ahead and do that in orange, just so we can see that difference. So now I'm using C is parallel to D. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight C is parallel to D. And because I'm using C and D, I've already got 8. So the line that connects 8 and 13 is line B. And I can see that these angles are alternate interior angles, which means that those are congruent. So now I have my given, which is C is parallel to D. And now using alternate interior angles, I can say that angle 8 is congruent to angle 11. All right, so now I've reached that point. Well, I can use the fact that both of these are congruent to angle 8. So now I can use the transitive property to prove that angle 1 is congruent to angle 11. All right, and I'll just go ahead and finish off those connections so that I can see that those two parts are in fact congruent.